So again, welcome everyone. Today we are creating a space to explore how we connect, love, and heal. So attachment isn't just about psychology. It is also culture, history, and our community. So in the African tradition of Ubuntu, I am because we are, we learn that our healing is connected. And we're going to be showing how that connection works a little later on. So this is just an overview of what we'll be doing. We'll look at the objectives. We'll do some grounding and affirmation. I'll do an icebreaker and look at attachment in the African descent, Black communities. From a cultural and an historical lens, we'll be identify attachment patterns in ourselves, and we'll be looking at healing and reclaiming secure attachment. And then we'll have closing and reflection, and there's a time for question. Also, if you have question in between, that's fine as well. And as Niraya talked about, that you can, there'll be time for participation, so you can put those answers in the chat or you can raise your hands. So the objectives for this session or webinar is to understand what attachment is and why it matters, explore the impact of cultural and generational experiences on attachment, identify strategies to build and maintain secure attachments. And so we'll learn some practical ways to strengthen our community and family bonds. Now, we just want to take a few minutes to do some grounding and affirmation. So some of the things that will be talked about could bring some flashback or memories of things that have happened to you. It could bring up some trauma. So what we'll asking is that you take a little time if you need to take a little break from the discussion, that's fine as well, or you could do some deep breathing. So we're gonna just practice quickly a deep breathing technique that is called 4-7-8. So what that is, we'll breathe in for 4 seconds, hold it for 7 seconds, and breathe out slowly for 8 seconds. So if we just take a minute and we can do that together. And while you're doing that, we'll affirm ourselves. I'm rooted, I'm loved, I'm connected, and I will heal. So again, our affirmation, I am rooted, I am loved, I am connected, I will heal or I am healing. Now, our icebreaker, and I'd like participation. Who is someone you felt safe with while growing up? Is there someone that you felt safe with while you were growing up? For me, it was my dad. Anyone?
I'd say my mom, for sure.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, I would have to say the same in terms of my mother for sure.
Okay, thanks for sharing, John.
You're welcome.
Melissa said my mom as well.
Okay, hi, Melissa. I'm not seeing the name, so sorry about that. So, and I'll say the reason why. I love my mom, but my dad was my person, right? Um, I guess I was the first child in the marriage from my dad. So, um, we had that special connection. I was his first daughter. And so I got to go anywhere and everywhere with him. So we built that bond.
I see
So,
also
pardon me,
Laverne said her grandmother,
Lorraine,
Laverne.
Laverne, thank you. So what is attachment? In psychology, attachment is a deep and enduring emotional bond between two people, most notably between an infant and their primary caregiver. So what's the importance of attachment? So research have shown that attachment patterns developed in early life affects our brain development. It affects our self-regulation, which gives us the ability to self-soothe as adults. And it gives us empathy, which is a healthy indicator, healthy relationship indicator, and it impacts enhance our self-esteem. So when we talk about attachment, everything begins in the brain, right? The brain, if you notice, there are two brain pictures. One is the healthy brain and the other one is the unhealthy brain. And you notice in the healthy brain, it is full, you see, and on the unhealthy brain, you see some section are missing. And one of the thing that the brain is crucial for attachment because early interaction, structure and function, especially in the limbic system and the right brain hemisphere, which are responsible for emotion, social behavior, and stress. So it's important that we have a well-developed brain. So John Bowlby, who I call the father of attachment, he looked at 4 phases of attachment development. So you have the pre-attachment, which usually from birth to 6 weeks. And you have the attachment in the making, which is 6 weeks to 8 months. And you have that clear-cut attachment, which is from 8 months to 18 months. And the last is the reciprocal relationship, which is from 18 months and onward. So in the pre-attachment, infant attract caregivers with their eyes. If you can remember, if you have children or a child. So the child is attracted to the caregiver with their eyes, and you get those signals from crying, smiling, and gazing. And the caregiver provides those positive response from the infant, keep the caregivers close. This closeness comforts the infant. So infants usually recognize the caregiver scent, voice, and face. And infant at this stage, the infant are not yet attached to the caregiver. So anybody, they will go to a stranger or they will go to any person. In the attachment, the 6 week to 8 month in the making, this is where the infant might start babbling and smile a little bit more and calm more quickly than when picked up. Now, infants learn their actions affect the behaviors of those around them. So infants begin to develop a sense of trust, expecting a predictable response from the caregiver. So for myself, when I was at about maybe 8 months, one of the things that I would tend to do is expect that my mom would come in and catch me, right? And so I look forward to that. Later on, as I got older, maybe 1 or so, I would just spring off the bed, and luckily they know to catch me. If not, I could have broken parts. So the next 8 months to 18 months, attachment is evidence. Baby might become upset if they don't see their caregiver, and they experience separation anxiety. The occurrence of separation anxiety depends on the infant's temperament, adult behavior, and the specific situation. So the baby may show some distress when the primary caregiver leaves, but the anxiety can be short-lived if the replacement caregiver is empathetic and supportive. And the reciprocal relationship, which looks at 18 months and onward, separation anxiety decreases as language and cognitive skills grow. So the child might be willing to be left alone and be playing with their toys, or they might, the toddler can understand some of the circumstances influencing the caregivers coming and going and can predict their return. As they get older, toddlers grow less dependent on caregivers and more confident that they will be accessible and responsive in times of need. So things you can do to form a secure bond with your child. Make yourself available to them and their needs. Get involved in your child's interests, right? If they like to play, whatever they like to do, get involved. Color, sitting down on the floor with them, validate your child's feeling, and enjoy just being together. So attachment theory. So attachment, as was highlighted before, is the emotional glue that connects us to others. It begins in childhood with our caregivers and shape how we love, trust, and communicate as adults. So there are 4 areas of the attachment theory. So the secure, which look comfortable with closeness and independence. And I'll give more detailed information a little later on. So anxious, worries about being abandoned, avoidant, struggles with closeness, and values independence too strongly, disorganized, which craves closeness but also fears it. So which one of these sounds familiar, most familiar to you or people you know? Anyone? Which one of these attachment styles sounds most familiar to you or people you know? If anyone is talking, I'm not hearing.
I would say anxious a little bit.
Okay. Is that Naraya? Can you just say your name?
Yeah,
Okay.
Naraya. A little bit anxious.
Thank you. Anybody else? So for me, it's a mixture of secure and sometimes anxious. So you can be have a dominant one and have others as well. So secure attachment, around 60% of us develop a secure attachment. This is when children experience their parents as predictable, nurturing, and available. Children learn that they're loved, noticed, and understood. And these are characterized by comfort with intimacy, trust in relationship, having a healthy balance, feeling safe, seeking support. And the key features are a positive view of self and others, comfortable with closeness and autonomy, able to regulate emotion and resolve conflict constructively. So these are not just for children, these are all about adults, because as we grow, we develop what we learn. So the anxious attachment or anxious preoccupied is characterized by fear of abandonment, excessive worry about relationship security, constant reassurance, sometimes clinging or overly dependent. And so this gives a negative self-image, but positive view of others. There's high emotional expressiveness and sensitivity to rejection, strong desire for closeness, and there's fear of being unloved or rejected. So the other avoidant attachment or dismissive avoidant, this is characterized by discomfort with closeness and dependence. So you have a little bit of the anxious and the avoidant mixing together. Values independent, emotional distance, suppress feelings to avoid vulnerability. And some of the key features is that you have a positive self-image, but negative view of others. So there's difficulty trusting or depending on others. And there's a preference for self-reliance. So the disorganized attachment or fearful attachment, gives both anxious and avoidant tendency, developing individuals, usually from trauma or abuse or inconsistent caregiving, where there's neglect. Some key features is negative view of self and others, fear of rejection combined with fear of closeness, emotional instability, difficulty regulating emotions. And as you listen and see these things, kind of reflect on yourself, what might be going on in yourself or what you might have experienced or see others that have some of those qualities. So this is a short video. And let me know if you're
Build a
hearing
website
it.
you love with Wix.
Yes, could hear it.
Your words, create your brand. Your opportunity, your breakthrough. Feeling a vibe? Run with it. From can't look away to gotta have it. Make every
The attachment theory argues that a strong emotional and
Are you
Hi
hearing?
everyone, my name is Neil from ECS Coffee. I'm going to invite you to come down to one of our 3 stores in the Greater Toronto area or visit us online at ECS Coffee.
The attachment theory argues that a strong emotional and physical bond to one primary caregiver in our first years of life is critical to our development. If our bonding is strong and we are securely attached, then we feel safe to explore the world. We know that there is always that safe base, which we can return to any time. If our bond is weak, we feel insecurely attached. We are afraid to leave or explore a rather scary-looking world because we are not sure if we can return. People who are securely attached are said to have greater trust.
Attachment styles and how they affect your relationships: secure, insecure, anxious, and insecure, avoidant. If you have a secure attachment style, you feel comfortable letting people get to know you, and you feel content that you can rely on the person to be there when you need them. If you have an anxious attachment style, you tend to be clingy in relationships, and you're always on alert for the smallest sign of rejection. You don't trust very easily, and it can be a roller coaster of emotions for you. You can end up with a lot of broken relationships because you drive people away with the suspicions. Also, your fear of rejection can lead you to end a relationship so that you can avoid being rejected. If you have an avoidant attachment style, you can appear aloof and distant in relationships. If you feel threatened in a relationship, you may ignore the threat and rely on your own personal resources to get you through the crisis. It's like complete psychological independence. Your partner or friend can feel like, you don't need me.
Okay. Can anybody relate or anybody has any thought on what they just heard? Are you hearing me? Hello?
Repeat one more time. Can you repeat it one more time just so
Are you
people can-
hearing me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Maybe
Okay.
they just one more time.
So just ask if anybody has any thought about what they just watched.
I definitely agree. I feel like when
Attachment style.
you've been through things like you kind of put up like a wall a little bit, right? So it's hard to just let people in. And it's definitely, I agree with you. I think you kind of open my eyes a little bit. Like your upbringing can really show you, like, because I didn't even realize that, like, how you're raised, like impacts how you like navigate through the world like that. It's really important.
Thank you.
So
So anybody else?
Yeah, I feel like different attachment styles vary according to the relationships you have with different people. Because, for instance, like in a family dynamic, sometimes parents could have favoritism over like one child, right? And that can kind of skew and make the attachment look a little bit different amongst the siblings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. So most people have a primary attachment style, but it's common to have some traits from other styles. So early parenting, childhood events, and adult experiences all play a role in determining attachment style. So people with insecure attachment can become more secure by adopting new beliefs and behavior. So you're not all because you learn to be insecure from birth. It can change with new beliefs and behavior. So partners in a relationship can also influence each other's attachment style either negatively or positively.
Melissa said that you can tell how people are attached with their interactions with others.
Awesome. Thanks, Melissa. So we'll look at the cultural and historical lens, how that impacts us as well. So we know about slavery, that historically our ancestors, what they went through and how that has been passed down even today. People are still called slaves. We were never slaves. We were enslaved by our oppressors. So some of these, there's forced family separation, whether we see a lot of families might be incarcerated or through migration, and colonialism still exists. There's systemic racism. So these can also impact trust, intimacy, and family bonds. When we look also at the cultural strengths, because of our extended family, that is what has helped us to get through some of these things, our community mothering, our community group, or spiritual resilience, and the idea of this African tradition, the Ubuntu. We are because of who we are, and our connection is what helps us to grow. I am because we are. And music is also a big part of our culture, storytelling. I was just listening today. We just had a hurricane, and there's so many songs that came out. There's so many music. And so these are some of the things that are impacting us, can impact our attachment as well. Natural disaster, we just had a hurricane in the Caribbean, how all these genocide, diseases can impact our attachment as well. And if you have other ideas, I'm open to hear them as well. So how do you think history has shaped the way Black families connect today? And this is open for everyone. How do you think history has shaped the way Black families connect today?
I guess, I mean, history, there's a lot in history in terms if we're going way back in terms of slavery, being colonized, being separated, it over the generations, sometimes it's created a bit of distancing in families. And you always find that for myself, it took years to have conversations with my mother and my dad just in regards to their upbringing. They were and it wasn't anything bad that they experienced in their upbringing, but they felt very secretive, not willing to share too much. And I always felt like I was poking and prodding, like, well, what about this? So when you're young, and it's not until later on in their older age where they just felt so comfortable in their skin, everything just came out. And even though it was such a beautiful opportunity to hear those things, it's a little bit bittersweet because you're like, I wish I would have known some of that stuff a long time ago. With myself, my challenge with the connection is that I always wanted to know how the relationships were built, what that looked like, because when I was going to start my family, I needed some sort of foundation and template. Because I grew up in a single parent home. So I was very uncomfortable because I wasn't sure what parenting or fathering was going to look like. So there was a lot of nervousness, uncertainty, doubt, lots of doubt. And that's why I was always proposing questions and stuff like that. But now, in my later years, and now having a family, um, I know it's my responsibility now to break some of those generational dilemmas that we've had.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
And maybe later on, you can tell us some of the ways that you did it.
Yes.
So everybody can learn. Anybody else?
Melissa said, as a Black parent, I know that I'm going to have to be more aware raising a Black son, knowing that he will be perceived in society and how Black men have been historically treated in the past.
Thank you so much, Melissa. That is so true. Right? And I'm glad that John is here and sharing as well about from the male perspective. So this is a video we're going to watch about psychological impact of slavery on our community.
Chat LLM is an all-in-one platform for you to use the best AI models out there. You can seamlessly switch between different models, plus you can use...
I'm here at Fort Monroe in Hampton, once known as Point Comfort, the very spot where the first enslaved Africans arrived in America 401 years ago in 1619. The atrocities my ancestors endured, packed and stacked on slave ships like pieces of property, brought to this country to build it with their blood, sweat, and tears. Psychiatrists say trauma like that can affect a people for generations. 7-year-old Wenta Amore Rogers' passion during a recent protest in New York struck a chord across the country.
The amount of passion in her voice, in her eyes for a child that young made me not just see her, it made me see our ancestors before her. So that little girl learned that from history. She learned that from her parents. And that's even like why it's so important for us to continue to tell the stories.
Nationally renowned psychiatrist Dr. Dion Metzger says the unrest we see today is 401 years in the making.
And the point of slavery to the point of, whippings and killing and lynchings, even, in generations after that. But the issue is that fear gets instilled into the children because parents are trying to protect their children. So that fearfulness, I think, is what's passed on, in addition to the trauma, just having to deal with the physical abuse, the sexual abuse.
Hampton Roads has long been a significant location in the dark history of racism.
Metzger says the outcry we're seeing today at peaceful rallies, sharing stories and fighting against injustice can be a form of healing.
And it's not going to be a quick fix. Us telling our stories is one big part of it. I'm a psychiatrist. I'm going to say therapy. It's like at this point, with all the images that we're seeing, all of the videos, it's a lot. And a lot of people think in order for you to suffer from PTSD, you have to be a victim. So you would have to have been one of those people like George Floyd or Breonna Taylor. No, you can still have the same traumatic impact just from watching the video. And sometimes it's even greater if you identify with the person.
Is it possible that as Black people, we are experiencing a PTSD from what they went through 401 years ago?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Just because we didn't experiencing it, us learning about the history or even from family stories, it's the same thing.
And that's why for so many in the Black community, it's not only about George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and Breonna Taylor. It's about the trauma that began right here in Hampton 401 years ago. In Hampton, I'm Jessica Larche, News 3.
Thank you. What are your thoughts on that video? Anybody has any thoughts? So we recognize that even though our ancestors have gone through some of these things, we are still experiencing that today with incarceration, police brutality, or just in the workplace, the segregation, the discrimination, all those things are still happening today. So how can we identify attachment patterns in ourselves? So question for everyone, how do I respond when someone pulls away from me? How do I respond with someone pulling away from me? Anybody?
Yes. So in terms of someone, I'll use my eldest as an example. When I noticed that he was pulling away from me, I had to give him space. I know myself. I was growing up in a very rough space. So I know myself and I know I could be very forceful. So I needed to comb things back quite a bit and realizing that he is not me and I am not him, and allow him the space to kind of to acknowledge that I hear him, and when he's ready to have a conversation, that he can reach out to me and have that conversation, and I'm open to listening. And that was one of the key things that I had to learn to do, is listen, because I talk a lot. I definitely have my opinions and want to say something, but I've learned to be silent and listen first. So it allows me to kind of navigate him where he needs to go.
Thank you for that, John. And Melissa say, I pull away also. Melissa, at some point, if you could expand on why do you normally pull away? Do I feel safe asking for help? Do you feel safe asking for help from people? Or do you find it easier or hard to trust others? Any thoughts?
Yes. Because you know what? Because I'm so accustomed to doing things on my own and getting it done. And so before, you know, when you do trust in others and then they kind of burn that bridge and you're like, I will never ask anyone again. I've been in that position and it just encouraged me just to do my own thing. But there came a point of time where I actually did need help for something. And it was difficult because you're very vulnerable and you don't know what the outcome of that's going to be. Because if you ask for help and if it ends up turning around and someone saying, well, remember when you asked me for help? That's what I was always conscious of. But once you surround yourself by good people, that's no longer a thing.
Awesome. And so if everyone could share one insight about your own attachment style, where would you say your attachment style fall into, John?
My attachment style.
Whether avoidance, secure, anxious, or dismissive.
It could be a sprinkle sometimes of dismissive. Yeah, I could be a back burner type of person.
Okay, thanks for sharing that. Anybody else? Share one insight about your own attachment style. Whether you put it in writing, I'll read it. I've navigated how to see the chat. So Melissa said avoidance, attachment, hyper-independent, and raised to do things for yourself. Okay, thanks for sharing. Anybody else?
I'd say it's like a sprinkle of kind of anxious and then also secure and also avoidant. It actually depends on who, like I agree with John, it depends on like who I'm talking to or like what relationship it is.
Okay, so everything seems to be contextual, right? And situational. And that's what life is about. So according to Thomas Carlyle, the greatest of fault, his quote is, the greatest of faults is to be conscious of none. So if we're not recognizing our faults, then if we have faults, and not recognizing them, then it can be impacting on us as well, because we can't change. So reflect on your personal pattern. So notice your reaction. Pay attention to how you typically respond in relationship, especially during conflict or when there are disagreement. Observe your emotional state. Reflect on whether you feel secure or insecure, anxious or distant in your connection. Assess your need for reassurance by considering how much validation you feel you need from others to feel loved or worthy. It's also important to analyze your feelings and self-perception. So you do that by examining your view of others. So do you generally trust others, or do you tend to be suspicious or jealous? Evaluate your self-esteem. Consider how you feel about yourself within a relationship. Do you feel good about yourself? Are you independent, or do you feel your worth is tied to your partner's validation or to things? Reflect on your comfort with intimacy. Are you comfortable with closeness, or do you tend to pull away when things become emotionally intense? Another thing to continue during your reflection is consider your past. Reflect on childhood relationship. Think about how your early relationships with parents or other caregivers may have influenced your adult relationship behaviors and feeling. You know, sometimes our parents might tell us, don't do this or don't do that. Don't hang out with that person. Don't have relationship with that type of person. And as we get older, those things are ingrained, and sometimes we miss out on some of the opportunities that were there for us. So try and journal your experiences. Writing down your thoughts and observations can help you identify recurring patterns and triggers over time. So healing and reclaiming secure attachment. So we can look from personal and collective practices. So what might be some personal and collective practices that we can do? So we can start taking care of ourselves, start believing in ourselves, start thinking positively about ourselves. Collective practices that we might connect with groups, we might, some people might go to church, they might go have fun with friends. So getting involved, managing our thoughts. So one of the biggest thing that impact us as human beings are the way we think. So there's a saying, the way we think impacts the way we feel, and the way we feel impacts our behaviors. And we notice that if we're feeling or our thoughts is negative, then we're going to feel negative. And so we have to start learning to manage our thoughts and think a little bit more logically instead of thinking based on feelings. So have a sense of joy. Create joy in your life. Regulate your emotions. Sometimes we get very upset easily. Sometimes just pause and reflect before we respond. Do some affirmation like what we did at the start of the session. Start learning to believe in yourself. Have those community engagement as we talked about before. Get up and dance as you see this picture and start enjoying having fun with yourself. Another thing that will help us heal is start decolonizing the mind and education. So we know colonialism has destroyed Africa and the Black communities and suppressed our knowledge, leading to internalized bias against African and Black cultures and tradition. So we want to reform our educational system. Our curriculum is to be more centered on indigenous knowledge and African history, because if we don't know about ourselves, it's hard for us to know who we are, and we need that foundation of our existence. So shifting the narrative. So decolonization is a transformative movement that reshapes the collective narrative. It reclaims African identity by celebrating diverse voices and rewriting dominant, often racist historical accounts. And I noticed we have a lot of our people who are writing now, so it's good to read some of those books. Revitalizing African language. Reclaiming indigenous language is a critical aspect of cultural decolonization, as language is a vehicle for transmitting culture and identity. So other strategies to help with secure attachment is reconnecting with our spiritual roots. Some people might use prayer, meditation, having rituals, or your spirituality. Some people might go to church. Again, affirming your self-worth daily, creating and nurturing your chosen family or community, practicing being vulnerable and communicate. Be open to sharing. I find a lot of times that we are afraid to communicate. We're afraid to express what we're feeling, and being vulnerable is very hard for us. Start centering your body center healing, meditate, be mindful about what's going on in your life and around you. And it is important also to connect with cultural therapists who are culturally competent, so they can understand who you are and can relate to you in a logical way. So for example, we can practice by saying, and we can all do that, I feel, and we express that emotion when a situation happens. For example, if we ask somebody, you ask your partner or a friend to do something. For example, I would say washing the dishes. So I ask my husband to wash the dishes, and I come home and it is still there. I feel frustrated when the dishes are not washed, instead of us blaming each other. So express what your needs are. I need your help to do the dishes or whatever. In terms of as you practice saying that to yourself, what felt natural for you or what felt difficult, if you don't mind sharing? Anyone?
Yes, that stuff is interesting right there, in terms of language and how we use it. I find out in the beginning, before I got married, the language we used to always use was you. You said you were going to whatever, so automatically it's accusatory, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because rightfully so, you know the person who did it. So you're like, well, you said you were going to whatever, and it didn't resolve anything. I can't remember the name of the book that we read, but it spoke about the I language, and saying, and as you said, I really feel upset that what we discuss wasn't addressed, and I would like to know what would be the best way for us to kind of resolve this. And that changing the language definitely changed the outcome of the argument. It didn't start off so heavy. It actually allowed each person to kind of to think how they contributed to the situation.
Thank you for sharing that. Is it D Dawn? Have a raised hand. Did somebody raise their hand?
So raised. I don't see.
Okay.
Yeah, D, I think, raised her hand.
Oh, okay. I can't see that.
Go ahead, D.
There we go. Oh, you guys have missed me a few times, but that's okay. Thank you. So I'm finding just the reframing of the way we speak to each other. It's a process, because naturally we want to just say what comes to our mind, but it's almost like we have to pause, reframe it in our mind, and then let it come out of our mouth. So it is a very difficult process, because we have to frame it in a way I feel. So it's difficult, but it's possible through repetition and practice.
Awesome. That's true.
Agreed.
Thanks, Dee.
You're
And
welcome.
sorry about missing you earlier.
It's okay. It's
You can
okay.
just unmute and say something because
I
I can't
can't
see.
though. I don't see that option for me.
Okay, all right. Or put in the chat, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Neraya, I think Neraya hand is raised.
No, let me see.
No worries. Or what? So anybody else has any thought? So naturally, as Dee and John mentioned, if it's not something that we are used to, it's gonna feel unnatural at first, but we have to be intentional, because when we are in our emotional state, we don't even have time to pause and reflect. But if we start practicing, learning to pause and think about what is it that we're going to say, that can be helpful, and we develop that habit. So as we close, remember that healing is both personal and collective. By understanding our attachment and reclaiming our secure connection, we continue the legacy of resilience our ancestors began. So if each person can give at least one word about how you are leaving this session.
Reflective.
Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
Impacted.
Impacted. Who was that?
Naraya.
Naraya, thank you. Melissa says aware. Laverne, reflective. Thank you for sharing. And so our affirmation, you can put in the chat if you have others. Our affirmation as we leave is I'm rooted, I'm loved, I'm connected, and I'm healing. So just to recap, why is attachment important? The world will feel more exciting and less frightening. I can be vulnerable and how others can help me. I can be curious and find joy more easily. I think there's a chat. So Laverne also said, I belong. Awesome. So it's time for question. If you have any questions. Or thought or feedback. Earlier I'd asked that we share some, John talked about sharing some of the example, and Melissa about sharing some example, how you got through some of the issues that you were experiencing. What were some of the strategies that you used?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as I was saying before, growing up in an environment where explanations were really not present, being able to provide explanation. I noticed that, my children are very inquisitive like myself. And now I get it, because when they ask me tons of questions, sometimes I'm like, why do they keep on asking me all these questions that I don't want to answer? But now I understand from my mom and my dad's perspective. But I needed to break that cycle and give some context to certain things, which is helpful. And it's not that you have to always elaborate on everything, but it's good to give an answer. Because what I find that if you as a parent do not provide any form of feedback, then they will look somewhere else for that information. And at the end of the day, you always have to collect your children. You have to, it's important. And so I'm very intentional about that. We're very close to Jesus, to God. I encourage them to read their Bible. That was just part of my environment growing up, in terms of going to church and learning your Bible, but it wasn't enforced. It was just things that you're supposed to do it. And there was no conversation of why. why am I reading this book? What is this book about? Who is Jesus? Like there was never that conversation, just that I'm telling you this and you have to do it. So us having a conversation looks completely different, and it allows us to grow and learn together because I don't know everything. So their questions help me kind of troubleshoot and say, you know what, I'll put that in the parking lot and I'll come back around to it.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that.
You're welcome.
D raised hand.
Yes. So I just have a comment. Really and truly, it's refreshing to hear a man, John, come on and share and be intentional about where he's been and where he's going and the journey along the way. So he just answered my question because it has to be rooted in something, and you have to believe in something in order to rise above adversity. And I can hear by his faith that that is the sustaining and the anchor that he holds on to. So likewise, that has been my anchor in just life. I'm a survivor of breast cancer. And so God is all I had to hold on to in that time. And it drew me closer, and I did some introspection. So it was really a helpful time to quiet myself and just immerse myself in the word to help me get through one of the most difficult times in my life. But in speaking about children, I have two older children and a young, well, they're all adult children, but I had my first child at 22, and then I had my last child at 34. So there was such a big difference in how I parented. My older two, I wasn't as patient. And I find now with my youngest that I kind of had to reparent myself in order to parent differently. So it's really amazing how patience can change the way that you handle things in life and how you parent.
So thanks for sharing that, Dee. It's as you all said, is having that realization, because sometimes we have to be aware that what we are doing or what we learned didn't work, and we have to break that cycle, and something has to be done differently. So we have to be intentional. So thanks for sharing, Dee and John. Anybody else? So are we good on time, Naraya?
Yes. Yeah.
So how much minutes? I have one other video that I can
Sure. Yeah.
quickly share, that I started earlier and didn't get to do it because I was having technical difficulty. This is just an overview, and then we can close off.
Build a website you love with Wix. Where your words.
The attachment theory argues that a strong emotional and physical bond to one primary caregiver in our first years of life is critical to our development. If our bonding is strong and we are securely attached, then we feel safe to explore the world. We know that there is always that safe base, which we can return to any time. If our bond is weak, we feel insecurely attached. We are afraid to leave or explore a rather scary-looking world because we are not sure if we can return. People who are securely attached are said to have greater trust, can connect to others, and as a result are more successful in life. Insecurely attached people tend to mistrust others, lack social skills, and have problems forming relationships. There is one type of secure attachment, and there are three types of insecure attachments: anxious ambivalent, anxious avoidant, and anxious disorganized. In responses to distress, the first three react organized, while the last acts disorganized. To understand the theory better, let's look at Mr. and Mrs. Smith, who have 4 children, Luca, Anne, Joe, and Amy. The Smiths are lovely parents who cuddle, make frequent eye contact, speak warmly, and are always there for their kids. But one day, Mr. Smith falls very sick and dies. For Mrs. Smith, life now becomes very difficult. She spends all day working, while at the same time trying to care for her children. An impossible task. At 6 years of age, Luca's brain is for the most part developed, his character strong and his worldview shaped. The new situation does not affect him much. He knows there is still always Mum, his safe haven. He feels securely attached. Later, he turns into a trusting and optimistic young man. His self-image is positive. Anne, who is 3, has problems coping with the new lack of attention. To Anne, her mother now acts unpredictably. She is anxious about their relationship and as a result becomes clingy. To get her mum's attention, she has to raise her emotional state and scream. When her mum finally reacts with a predictable response, she herself acts ambivalent and doesn't show her true feelings. Later in life, others think Anne is unpredictable or moody. Her self-image is less positive. Her attachment style is anxious ambivalent. 2-year-old Joe spends his days with his uncle, who loves him, but thinks that a good education means being strict. If little Joe shows too much emotion or is too loud, his uncle gets angry and sometimes punitive. This scares Joe. He learns that to avoid fear, he has to avoid showing his feelings, also in other situations. As an adult, he continues this strategy and has problems entering relationships. His image of himself is rather negative. His attachment is anxious avoidant. Amy, who is just 1 year old, gets sent to a nursery. The staff there is poorly trained, overworked, and often very stressed. Some are outright abusive. Amy therefore becomes anxious of the very people she seeks security from, a conflict which totally disorganizes her ideas about love and safety. As she is experiencing fear without resolution, she tries to avoid all social situations. As an adult, she thinks of herself as unworthy of love. Her self-image is very negative. Her attachment is anxious, disorganized. Our attachment is formed in the very first years of our lives, a time when we are too young to communicate our anxiety, and as a result, can experience high levels of stress. Then our adrenal gland, an organ sitting on top of our kidneys, produces the stress hormones adrenaline and cortisol. The heart rate increases, the blood pressure goes up, and we become alert. If that happens frequently, it is called toxic stress. Toxic because it impairs the development of a child's brain and weakens the immune system. In embryos or at a very young age, toxic stress can even switch the expressions of genes, which can affect our health many decades later. By simulating a strange situation, we can assess an attachment style already by the age of 1. To do this, we let the child play with their mother for a few minutes inside a room. Then the child is left alone. The key moment is the child's reaction when her mother returns. Securely attached children first usually hug their mother, then can calm down and eventually get back to playing. Insecurely attached children can be ambivalent and avoidant. Some can't stop crying or refuse to continue playing. The long-term effects of our attachment in the early years are well documented. Using the theory, researchers at Minnesota University were able to predict already at age 3 if a child would drop out of high school with 77% accuracy. In another study, undergraduates at Harvard were asked to assess how close they felt to their parents. 35 years later, they were asked about their health. 91% of those who said they had a rather broken relationship with their mother were also diagnosed with health issues, including coronary artery disease, hypertension, and alcoholism. For those that had reported a warm relationship, the figure of poor health diagnosis was just 45%. But there is another reason why the early years deserve special attention. They are the starting place for subsequent behaviors. A kid that feels securely attached at age 2 can make friends at kindergarten. Their worldview gets reinforced with every interaction, and they develop optimism. As a result, they make good relationships at school, then at college, and later at work. Highly insecurely attached children can miss out on this opportunity. Psychologist John Bowlby, a pioneer in attachment theory, allegedly said, "What cannot be communicated to the mother cannot be communicated to the self." In other words, those who feel insecurely attached might not quite understand themselves. To get to know who they are and what they feel, they might have to go way back in time.
Okay, so that was just a review of what the impact can be if we're insecure or if our attachment style is avoidant or we don't have secure attachments. So it doesn't mean that because we were brought up insecure that we can't change. It's a lifestyle change. We can start doing things differently, and we can break the cycle in our family, but we need to work on ourselves because it also impacts our health. So thank you all for coming out.
Attachment styles and how they affect.
So this is the end of the presentation. Thank you for joining and journeying with me. And it was a pleasure being here with you.
Thank you, Ruth.
So we have, thanks, Laverne. Thanks, Dee. Thanks, John.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Jennifer.